My guest today is Dr. Jessica Zitter, a documentary filmmaker, writer, physician, and founder of Real Medicine Media, a nonprofit devoted to using story to transform and humanize medical culture. Now, Dr. Zitter is the primary featured subject and a member of the team that created the Oscar and Emmy nominated Netflix documentary Extremis in 2016, and she went on to direct and produce the award winning documentary Caregiver, a love story in 2020, which examines the growing crisis of family caregiver burden in the United States. Now, her third documentary, The Chaplain and the Doctor, explores the transformative relationship between a hospital chaplain and a physician, challenging the fragmented clinical approach to patient care. Now, her essays and articles have appeared in the New York Times, the Atlantic Time magazine, and even the Journal of American Medical Association, among others. Now, Dr. Zitter practices the unusual combination of critical care and palliative care in Oakland, California. But she is here today to discuss this incredible documentary, The Chaplain and the Doctor. So let's welcome physician and award-winning filmmaker, Dr. Jessica Zitter, to the show. Welcome, Doctor.
So glad to be here with you.
Oh, well, I absolutely loved this film. And I have to ask, when did you realize that you had a story to tell from your own profession as well as from the side of chaplaincy?
It really took a long time. This was not an intentional project whatsoever. First of all, I never thought I was going to be a filmmaker. That was absolutely not in the plan. I was a doctor and I went to medical school and I was started to write because I really sort of realized that I was having some emotional distress about the practice of medicine. It was feeling very disconnected and I was feeling a little bit like an automaton. And I found this new world of palliative care, which I can talk about after. And once I did, I started to feel this release and ability to tell stories. And I would write them and then eventually started to publish them and saw such a resonance with other healthcare providers like myself who were just needing to think about things in a different way. And so then I fell into filmmaking, which was pretty crazy. I saw a film that was made in our hospital, and it was so powerful that I realized that the impact of making films was so much more powerful than writing a book or writing an article. So I started falling into filmmaking, and then with time, I started to capture footage of Betty on my iPhone, and realized with over the course of a few years that actually this was an important story to tell.
Well, you tell a story in the documentary when you were a little girl, you got injured, you went to the hospital, and then you had this thought of, wow, I could do this. This is great. I could be holding people's hands. But then you entered the medical field, but then you noticed it was very impersonal.
Yes. I mean, I think many of us come to medicine with this intention of really caring for people and healing and attending to people. And I think what really happens, unfortunately, is that when we're trained, the training of a doctor is actually inculcating you with values that you didn't really consciously want to have. Things like hierarchy, things like judgment and bias towards people because you want to know things really quickly and you want to have certainty. Things like always having to be certain about things and not necessarily letting people see you sweat. And those are the kinds of traits that are built into medical training that really serve to make us into the non-healers that we didn't think we were going to be, people who are kind of pulled away, distanced, and non-vulnerable. And I think that's just not what a healer really needs to be.
Well, did you always see that science and faith clashed in your medical profession, or were you reluctant to see early on that both actually need each other?
I had no idea that spirituality came into the practice of medicine at all, or that it should. I really believed in science. I believed in technology, in instrumentation, in understanding, microbiology and the function of the organs. And I had no idea that there was any value to sitting with people and connecting with them. I thought I was supposed to be bustling in and out of the room and tough and smart and know everything. So no, I didn't think about spirituality at all. It wasn't even on my radar.
Well, you and Chaplain Betty Clark met on the palliative care team. So, for all of my viewers out there and listeners, what is palliative care and what is its function in the hospital in regards to patients?
Great question. I get asked this every single time. Palliative care is a relatively new subspecialty. It really only became officially boarded in the American Board of Internal Medicine in 2008. I became lucky enough to be exposed to a very early version of palliative care in the 2002 2003 range. It was a team in our hospital, and by the way, there were only 4 hospitals in the United States that had a presence of palliative care in the intensive care unit, which is where I first came into contact with it. And they called themselves the family support team. No one knew what palliative care was. Like, how do you even spell that? Palliative care is a form of practice which looks at patients as a whole entity. They're Yes, their organs, yes, their medical disease, yes, they have pain and symptoms, and yes, they have a spiritual life and a family life. It's really thinks about people in a very holistic way. And to palliate, it's a Latin verb which means to cloak. And when you think about cloaking somebody, this sort of feeling of just caring for them and taking them under a cloak and comforting them is really what palliative care is. The practice of palliative care really centers on really maximizing quality of life as much as possible, regardless of what the life expectancy is of the disease. Anybody who has suffering that is sort of unmitigated, that is not being treated, successfully by the healthcare world, is appropriate for a palliative care consultation. Most of the time, palliative care is most helpful for patients with very, very serious and often end stage illness. But it's been shown to be of great benefit to people. And I'll say one more thing, which is like organizations like the American Society for Clinical Oncology. And you can imagine in oncology, there's many, many people with very serious end stage, often illness, and who have tremendous distress and anxiety and symptoms and all sorts of things. And the American Society for Clinical Oncology in 2012 made the recommendation that every single person with a serious diagnosis of cancer should immediately be put into a palliative care consultation. And it doesn't happen for a whole variety of reasons. I could write a whole essay on this or a whole book, which I did. But it's a real problem that we're not getting palliative care, this incredible type of support, to so many patients who need it.
You know, out of all of the patients that were featured in this film, Naomi Thomas was the one that probably caught my eye the most for multiple reasons.
Mhm.
Every word that came out of her mouth, I felt, I understood.
Mhm.
And from her point of view, and I 110% get it, she's looking at the whole situation with common sense. From the medical side, do doctors have the tendency to not consider common sense and what comes out of a patient's mouth? Because Naomi nailed it. I was actually on her side with everything that she said.
She says at the end, one of the most powerful, I think, sentences in the whole film, which is, you think that people are crazy, but they're not crazy. They're just saying what God meant them to say. And you dismiss them because you act like they're crazy. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful sentences. And in fact, right after that, Betty says the same thing. She says, people often like, don't go in that room. That person's crazy. She says, and most of the time, those patients are Black. And I think it's really true. There is a certain amount of bias that makes it more likely that people are going to be like, well, that person's difficult. This is, racial bias. But the truth is, someone just said to me the other day, anytime you have somebody who advocates for themselves in healthcare, or a parent or a loved one who advocates for their loved one who's a patient, people think they're crazy. There's a whole bunch of reasons why in healthcare we dismiss people. We dismiss people. Oh, that's that kind of person. That's that kind of person. And we don't actually just listen to them. We don't actually try in any way to be curious about their situation, to empathize with them and to see how we would feel if they were in the situation like Naomi was, where she was being completely misled about what was happening to her in the hospital. So yes, do we not listen to people, the words that come out of people's mouth? Do we not feel curiosity about who they are and what their experience is? Yes, we do not do that. We do not do that, and that is one of the things we must change.
Well, even in her case, she said, I've been there for 3 weeks and nothing has been done. I'm like, okay, I get that.
Right.
And I'm going to get to it in a moment because this film showcases a much deeper industry, industry, interesting story, excuse me, when it comes to African American medical care. Because
Mhm.
everything I saw, everything I heard, I have heard from others. I've even seen research papers that prove what was said in this film. And and it even takes me back to an interview that I did a couple of years ago with a female physician, and the discussion was even when women go in because they know something's wrong with them, they're trying to find an answer to it, and male doctors have the tendency to disregard and go, it's your hormones, blah, 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 blaming things without ever doing any tests. And a woman's going, I'm not crazy.
Right.
So
Right.
I saw the parallel.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. You don't have to be black, you don't have to be a woman to have people dismiss you. You could be a white guy and you will be dismissed for whatever reason. Someone will come in and say, that guy's got terrible politics. That guy reminds me of my uncle. They won't necessarily say it out loud, but those things will impact the way they think about you and the way they care about you, care for you. And by the way, it's significantly, if people actually do take the time to sit with curiosity and get to know somebody, I don't care how different their lives are from yours, there will be there will be
You just reminded me of the
yeah.
greatest scene that was ever filmed in Ted Lasso.
Oh,
It's the dartboard scene, and he says, I would rather have people be curious than judgmental.
I just saw that the other day. That's so funny that you brought that up because that's exactly I remember noting it and saying, "Wow, that's a great line." And so that's so funny that you just mentioned that. I agree.
Yeah,
Curiosity is the balm of humanity.
it is. Now, the other half of this film is Chaplain Betty Clark. She has her own incredible story to tell. So tell me about Betty.
Betty, well, as you see if you watch the film, the way Betty got my attention was by speaking truth to power. And I don't mean to say I'm so powerful. She basically stood up to me, which does not happen very often, as a doctor. To have a chaplain standing up to a doctor is very, very unusual. It's extremely unusual. It doesn't happen very often. And I was like, wait a minute, we're not even in the same lane. Who do you think you are? Betty says it like she sees it. And for me, in that moment, I had a reaction of like, you're just, you're just being difficult. And I dismissed it and I got very upset and I left the room. And I will say, as I thought about it over the course of the day, and I realized that what she had said to me was absolutely true. And it showed a side of me that I was not proud of. My defenses kind of came down. And I then came to her and I said, okay, you know what? I want to talk. And she gave me a safe space to talk. She gave me a space to be her friend. She gave me a space to not be judgmental towards me and to let me explore and explore who I wanted to be. And eventually, over many years of being her partner and friend, to get back to being the healer that I had always come to be. That's why I came to medicine, was to be a healer and a carer and somebody who connected with my patients. And I had lost my way. And that's how Betty uh, reeled me back in.
There was all, for documentaries, it's not like a narrative film where you could have a twist and a turn, but there was a twist and a turn in this documentary, which I rarely ever see. So I was looking at it, I went, ah. So when did you realize that Chaplain Betty was the one holding the patient's hand, the very thing you dreamed about as a little girl, but you found medicine was not the holding hand profession?
It was over time. It was watching. It was once I started to pay attention to her, which I hadn't been doing, it was really letting what she was doing in, seeing it, figuring out what parts of it I loved, what parts of it I didn't love. And frankly, I loved most of it. I realized that her ability to connect, her warmth, her non-judgmental presence was so powerful, not only for the patient, but for me standing in the room, and just brought this sense of real healing into the room. And by the way, it's not just the patient that needs healing. Betty always calls us wounded healers. And you can see as you watch the film that Betty and I both come from trauma and very different lives. We are from completely different lived experiences, but we really share values. And the idea of being partners with somebody who shares your values and your really deep values and the reason you want to do what you're doing, that values that may have gotten kind of covered up by your training. There was something very therapeutic about that and something extremely powerful for me.
So, how do you and Betty balance science and faith, bringing synergy of care to the patients?
You're a great interviewer, by the way. These are great questions.
I watch the films with a very close eye.
You really got the film. It's really Betty once says it in the film. She says, "That's why we do our best work together." When you have two people, and by the way, it's not just because she's a chaplain and I'm a doctor and we have professional diversity. We have all sorts of different kinds of diversity. Clearly, we have lived experience diversity. We have personality diversity. We come at things from very different perspectives, but we come at it with this very trusting sort of shell where we can kind of, I can do something and then she kind of can pull back here and we can sort of see how the whole is so much more than each of us can bring ourselves. And it it's really, incredible to watch our patients. When we walk in together, they want somebody caring about their medical and knowing their medical story, but they also want someone attending to their soul. And so, yes, there's this partnership, but even when Betty's not there, I can be more attuned to connecting with their soul. I may not be as good as Betty, and you see that in the film, but I can try and I can know that it's of value. And the same with Betty. If I'm not there, her work with me has allowed her to become more attuned to some of the medical issues and more, sometimes if you're not a medical person, everything just seems like a black box and you don't really understand it. All you see is this person suffering. But through our relationship and what she's learned from me, I think, and if she were here, she'd probably say this, that she has learned the complexity of the medical situation, that even when a patient's like, this doctor's not taking care of me, it's actually very often very complicated. And a lot of times what Betty can do is mitigate their distrust, because there's a lot of distrust in the hospital. Okay, everybody since COVID, by the way, do you know that confidence in the healthcare system has gone from about 74% on average to about 43%. I'm remember a huge COVID itself has dropped trust of all comers in the healthcare system. Distrust is rampant. And I think that coming in as a team of people with different perspectives and different experience really drives up trust.
You know, I have a very dear friend of mine, and he's a hospital chaplain
Mhm,
for multiple hospitals.
mhm.
And the things he tells me, and I'm just like, wow. And
Yeah.
you would probably agree with this. In medical school, nutrition's kind of been thrown out the window. But then I'm thinking now, there needs to be a class, there needs to be a course, regardless what the medical student believes or not, to understand what a chaplain's job is. Because if we are to be body, mind, and spirit, you can't go into care just going body and mind.
Or just
And
bought.
with you, because when I was watching this film, the great thing about this film is for those that are believers, they get it. They're like, yeah, this is awesome. Those that are not, you feel things that become hesitant to others. So for you, because I noticed it, What was it like when you prayed with Betty for the first time?
Well, I'll tell you what's crazy, is that we did capture it on film. That was the moment, and that was filmed in 2017. And so Betty's voiceover was filmed pretty recently. And she said, and I asked her to come and pray, and she did. And we happened to have that footage, which is very funny because if you look at it, you'll see I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I'm Jewish. We don't pray the way an African American family prays. And I just feel like I'm witnessing in a way that's like voyeuristic. And I don't think I'm supposed to be here. And what I realized is I was supposed to be there because my patients want me in the room. They want you. There's a book that was just written called something like Doctor, Can You Pray With Me or something like that. Patients want their doctors to pray with them. They want them to, even if it's not active prayer, they want them to witness them. They want them to witness their soul. They want them. And again, a lot of patients are not religious and we need to connect with their soul. And that's something Betty taught me. So frequently she'll walk into the room and someone says, "Oh, I don't need you. I'm not, first of all, I'm not dying, or I'm not religious. I'm an atheist." And she says, "Oh, that's great. Tell me what gives you meaning in your life." And people are always really willing to talk about that, regardless of their spirit, their religious tradition.
Well,
Betty often says, yeah, go ahead.
no,
Go ahead.
well, it's not in the film, but the thought came over me when I was watching it, especially on for you. When you started working with Betty, did you start to see more miracles with patients?
Oh, again, a great question. One of the things that I've learned from Betty is what miracles are. And they're not necessarily divine intervention. They're the miracle of lifting pain. It's the miracle of a reconciliation at the bedside. It's the miracle of being able to go home if that's where you want to go. And one of the things that Betty talks about is miracles all the time. And you see them, and they're real miracles. And when you call attention to them, everybody sees them, including the patient and the family. And it really lifts the experience of healthcare. And one of the things I will say that's really talk about judgment, talk about the healthcare system not doing justice to people. We have a saying like, "Oh, that patient in bed 5, they believe in miracles." It's almost like air quotes. What does that mean to a doctor? It means it's not even worth trying to talk to them. They're not going to be reasonable. They just are waiting for God to come and do something unrealistic. And what I've learned, and what I hope other people like me have learned about what miracles are to people, is something that they can tangibly hold. And Betty can help. A lot of times Betty is the person who translates between the healthcare team that's like, "Oh, they believe in miracles," and the family that's saying, "We want a miracle." And Betty helps us to see the miracle together. And talk about restoring trust.
You know, I always tell people on my television show when, because, I see it in the film where there's fear in patients. It's just like that one African American gentleman who
Yeah.
felt that he was diagnosed with colon cancer, but he had so much fear he didn't do anything about it. And I tell people, I said, look, I know that you're praying for the miracle of healing, that God's going to touch you and heal you, which he can. There's no
Mhm.
doubt. There's been medical proof of that. Even when Jesus healed somebody, he said, go show yourself to the priest to prove it. But then there's also other miracles, like you said. There's miracles of, maybe you're praying for your insurance company to approve the medication or approve a treatment, and
Mhm.
they say yes. That's a miracle. So
Yeah.
there's so many things where we don't need to be in fear of going to
Yeah.
the doctor. And like you said, trust in the medical profession took a nosedive after COVID and has not recovered.
No.
And but you know, if you get hit by a bus, you don't call your herbalist, you call an ambulance.
Right.
So
It's
you got to
true.
use wisdom. And so I understand that. And, so I think, I just love this film so much, Doctor, because to see both sides come together. And, but then there's these, there's all the patient stories. There's your story, there's Betty's story. And you brought it up earlier. You and Betty have a history of racism in your family. You're Jewish, she's African American. What I found interesting was the parallel of each of your lives looked like it was on a collision course for you to work together.
Yeah, I would say so. And I don't think we ever would have realized it if we didn't have the time, the space, the trust to sit and really learn more about each other. And I think that we, in these times where diversity is not necessarily something we value, I think that this is a film that really shows how people can come together again, even though we're very different. And I hope it gives us some hope for the future.
You know what goes through your mind when people say the Holocaust never happened?
It's not even my mind. It's visceral. It's devastating. It's shocking. It's hopelessness, really. I mean, if somebody really reduces your reality to, and it's not just, denying something cognitively, it's really the thought that someone could hate you so much as to minimize facts. It's really disconcerting, and I'm sure it very much mirrors how Betty feels when she confronts racism as a young woman in Jim Crow Kentucky, where she really was just the stories are chilling. I mean, I can't even tell you many. We couldn't put most of them into the film because there were so many. And I know that she deals with it every day in her life, even now, and her family. And I just think that there's something pretty devastating about that, about feeling like people hate you for reasons that you can't really do anything about.
Well, you show in the film that you went to Israel, you experienced both a bomb shelter, and then having to go to Romania to get out of the country. How instrumental was Betty in helping you get through that trauma?
Very. I mean, I actually, when I was there, I called her and when I was in the bomb shelter, and I said, I don't think I can make this film. I don't think I have the energy or the wherewithal to make a film when I feel so devastated and so alone. And you see, when I come home, she really helps me to regain my sense of purpose because I lost it for a little while there, and sort of felt like I didn't want to engage anymore with the world. And Betty brought me back. Really, I thank her for that.
So, how did you come to choose the patients for the documentary?
Oh boy. Well, people don't understand what a messy business making a documentary is. So it's like sausage making, as they say. So much of it ends up on the cutting room floor. So many great, great patient stories are on the cutting room floor. We really need to figure out how to use those and repurpose them in some way so that people can experience those stories as well. But you can only use so many. It was 86 minutes. You don't want to watch too long a film.
Yeah, and I thought every single patient that you chose covered many different areas of not just medicine, but palliative care, and also seeing the other side of what the patients are going through, decisions that they have to make once they feel that they get all the facts. It's like the African American woman that had cancer. Uh, you were sitting next to to her daughter, um, and had to make a very important decision based on a biopsy that was not only
Mhm.
dangerous, but could have gone the wrong way if she was to go through that. And I think that element of the film shows that once a patient truly has all the facts, and and I think with you explaining it, other doctors explaining, Betty coming in. So that's what patients really, truly need. And I had a thought because when I'm watching you and Betty interacting with patients, A weird thought crossed my mind, and it's not weird because I know that most of my audience is going to go, "Yeah, ask that question." For you as a physician and being and working with Betty for over a decade now, if doctors were to be more in tune with working with a chaplain, maybe it doesn't have to be every day,
Mhm.
would that help in removing the God complex that some physicians have?
Mm, I would say yes. I think when you are brought next to the big ideas of who is a person deeply, who is a person, what is hurting in that person, you start to understand the limits of what you can do with science. You start to understand the incredible power of bringing a spiritual approach. And I think what it does is it really reassesses this hierarchy, that we are all a part of, where the doctor's at the top, the chaplain's at the bottom. And I think people start to understand, as I did, that actually by flattening the hierarchy and getting rid of the silos that keep us together, we are all better healers. So I do think it would help.
I was so surprised that you made house calls.
Oh, yes, we've been doing that a lot. I do a lot of them with Betty. We go to a lot of funerals. Betty's often asked to officiate at funerals, and yeah, we go see our patients after there's a movement towards going to people's homes now, and in fact, there's actually official divisions in palliative care departments where it's actually home based palliative care, and people actually go to people's homes.
See, I'm at the age to where I remember when doctors made house calls, come in with a black bag. I remember
Oh, yeah.
those days, and but I thought it was so touching in the film um, that you prayed for Betty.
Mm. It was very heartfelt. It was not necessarily the way she prays for herself or other people, but it was my way of bringing attention to her soul and her suffering.
Yeah, it was, and I loved that you had it in the film because it showed this strong connection, and it kind of flipped, and then there you were seeing the dream that you had of holding someone's hand.
Yes, that's right. There's a lot of hand holding in this film. That's
And
true.
I want so many people to see this film because I think maybe that 43, 46% can start to rise when people
Yeah.
see this film. So, what do you hope that this film will accomplish when people see it?
Oh, wow. I think it will accomplish different things for different people. I really committed to getting this into medical schools, residency training programs, and practicing physicians. We're actually attaching CME units so that people have more of an incentive to engage with the film. And really, by watching it, allowing people to start to explore their own thinking a little bit more by being able to watch kind of themselves on screen in the form of me and seeing sort of my experience of transforming a little bit. I think that it allows people to kind of lower their defenses instead of feeling defensive and say, "Ooh, okay, that looked interesting. Let me reflect on my thinking and the way I think and the way I practice." And I'm hoping that it's going to help people to come to this work with more attention to the lack of attention to spirituality, the hierarchy, the implicit bias. So that's the healthcare world. I also think, chaplaincy has a lot to learn from this film as well. Number one, their value, because a lot of times I think that they don't feel it in the hospital, but I think understanding how valued they are and how important their work is, even if the person next to them doesn't value them, they are filled with value, and that giving them that sense of empowerment to come and speak their truth the way Betty did with me. And I think for the rest of the community, the non-healthcare community, non-chaplaincy community, I really do believe that this film can help them understand the environment of care, its pitfalls and its beauty. And I think that, having them feel comfortable asking for a chaplain, understanding that the chaplain hopefully isn't just parochial, that it's really about the spirit, it's not about a specific religion. and getting a palliative care consult if necessary.
One of the things I noticed, and I think it needs to be done nationwide, if patients feel that they're not being listened to, um, they almost feel like the doctor has a set protocol. It's the same protocol for everybody. This is the way it's done. Um, and then it's almost like the patient feels like they're caught between a rock and a hard place. With a chaplain coming in at the same time, I think it would bring clarity, peace, peace of mind. Because you've seen this. A lot of people end up in the maybe they're older. They end up in the hospital. They have no one. No one comes to visit them,
Mhm.
and now they're left. They're sick. They don't feel good, and then they're left to make a decision.
Yeah.
And they don't have that. They don't have that helping hand, that holding hand that they need. And more patients would probably have a little bit more trust if the listening increased, but at the same time, they are, how would I put this? That they would feel more peace in their overall situation.
I think so. I mean, I think that is for sure. I think that, again, anybody who encounters a healthcare team where there is real listening and curiosity is going to feel more peace, more comfort, more calm. And that sort of tension that can then itself exacerbate into a vicious cycle is calmed. So,
I
yes.
agree. So,
Yeah.
where can everyone see this film?
Oh my goodness. Well, we are doing a national tour. It's starting tomorrow in New York City at the Angelica Theater. And then we're spending a week in New York. And then we're starting to do a tour around the East Coast and the Midwest. And then later in the summer, we're going to be going to California and the West Coast. And then eventually we're going to come down into the South and the Southeast. So we are going to be doing a lot of traveling with this film. We are also eventually going to be putting it on PBS, but that's down the line. We really hope that people will invite us to do community screenings, whether in person or virtual. We're really eager to share the film. We hope that we're going to be coming down to different areas. If people want to go look at our list, and it's growing all the time, of places that we're going to see if we're going to be near you, please go to, and I don't know if you're going to publish these links later, but the chaplainandthedoctor.com, and then click on upcoming events. So that's
Br-
one thing you can do. And the
Bring
other
this
thing,
film. Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead, doctor.
the other thing people can do, which I think would be really powerful, is to join our newsletter. And this is complicated for some people, but I'll tell you what to do. Text on your phone, text to the phone number 66866, text the word caring. So the phone number that you text to is 66866, and write the word caring, and then you'll be on our newsletter.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll have all of that on screen, ladies and gentlemen, so you can text or go to their website, The Chaplain and the Doctor. Please bring this film to Houston, which has the largest medical center in the country.
Yes.
And they would definitely need this. And of course, like I said, my friend he's not only a pastor, he's also a chaplain to multiple hospitals, and he trains people to become chaplains.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm going to tell him about this film, and because everybody needs to see it. And ladies and gentlemen, The Chaplain and the Doctor is filled with warmth and humor. And this buddy film follows two unlikely allies working to bring curiosity, connection, and compassion to a broken healthcare system, one patient at a time. Now, Betty Clark is an 80-year-old African American chaplain on staff at the Wilma Highland Hospital campus, the Level 1 Trauma Center in Oakland, California. Now, Dr. Jessica Zitter is a white Jewish physician who you've just met, who has been Betty's colleague on the Palliative Care service for over a decade. And the two women are an unlikely team. chaplains and doctors do not usually pair up within the hierarchical and siloed halls of the hospital. Now, Dr. Zitter, trained to believe in medical interventions and science, was not seeking a relationship with a chaplain. But then Chaplain Clark never expected the doctor to take interest in her work. But with time, the two women's shared values and history overcome the forces that keep them apart, and they go on to do their best work together. Now, the chaplain and the doctor models a new kind of care, one that honors both spirit and body, the diverse backgrounds of patients, and the most human needs we all share. This is a must-see film documentary, not just about the story of two women who take their purpose and professions to help others, but we see that it helps each other to become even better versions of themselves. So I want to thank you, Doctor, for sharing this most powerful film documentary with me today. I loved it, and I want everybody to see it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, this particular interview is going to go in two different places. Now, many of you are filmmakers, and you can watch this interview or listen to all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. You need to check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel, and we're also on Spotify, iTunes, and more. And also, we're going to have segments of this interview on my daily television show, which airs nationwide across America, the Dr. Ward Bond Show. So, because it's not just mind and body, it's not just health and wellness, but there is a spirit and a soul that is attached to all of that. So if you treat the body, you treat the mind, and you treat the soul, then you have complete care. And this is a film that will show you that care is being taken care of. So, The Chaplain and the Doctor, a film documentary by Dr. Jessica Zitter, is a must-see film. So when it goes on tour starting tomorrow, make sure go to their website at thechaplainandthedoctor.com and check out where it's going to be showing. Sign up for the newsletter, because maybe we can get that level of trust from 43% back up to the 74% or higher, where it was. Because remember, we have to have doctors. Even Jesus said, go ask a physician. So, of course, he was the great physician. And so it all works together. And for the rest of you, always remember, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.